well, there isn't anything better to have than a problem that's worth solving, like that's really worth solving, right? And so the more of that you take on, the more you have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, no matter what. Think, I'm getting up, I'm trudging forward. Doesn't matter what I'm suffering from. I've got things that need to be done. They're necessary. And that gives you that sense of purpose that is the antidote to bitterness. You know, there's lots of different ways to interpret the world, and you can maybe even make a case that there's an endless number of ways to interpret the world. And the problem with that is that it kind of disorients you in terms of what you should be doing. But just because there's a very large number of ways to interpret the world doesn't mean there's a very large number of productive, meaningful, and sustainable ways to interpret the world. If you concentrate solely on your career, you can get a long way in your career. And I would say that that's a strategy that a minority of men preferentially do. That's all they do. They work like 70, 80 hours a week. They go flat out on their career. They're staking everything on the small probability of exceptional status in a narrow domain. But it's hard on them. They don't have a life. It's very difficult for them to have a family. They don't know how to take any leisure activity, like they get very one-dimensional. Now, it may be that that unidimensionality is the price you have to pay to be exceptional at one thing, right? Because if you're going to be something like a genius level mathematician, and you want to do that for, or a scientist say, it's like you're in your lab all the time, you're working 70 hours a week or 80 hours a week, you're smart, you're dedicated, you're unidimensional, and that's how you get to beat all the other people who are doing that. It's the only way. The possibility that you can make yourself slightly better on a continual basis is, I think that's something that's accessible to everyone. I think that's equivalent to leading a virtuous life. If you do not listen to that thing that beckons you forward, you will pay for it like you cannot possibly imagine. You'll have everything that's terrible about life in your life and nothing about it that's good. And worse, you'll know that it was your fault and that you squandered what you could have had. But the problem is you don't get a life. Now, if you love being a scientist and you have that kind of focus of mind, well, first of all, you're a rare person, and second, you're going to pay for it. But fine, more power to you. But it's a risky business to do that. You sacrifice a lot for it. You know, and I would say most often, if you're speaking about having a healthy life, that isn't what you do. You spread yourself out more. So, you know, you have a family, you have some things that you do outside of work that are meaningful to you and useful. You have a network of friends. Those 3 things alone, or 4 things alone, are plenty to keep you well oriented. And then if one of those things collapses, you know, everything doesn't go. Now, the price you pay for that is the more you strive to optimize that balance, the less likely you are to be fantastically successful at any single one of them. But you might have a very, you know, if you consider your life as a whole, that might be a winning strategy. Always take into account the cost of what you're doing now, right? Because what people tend to think is whatever I'm doing now is risk-free, and here's a bunch of options. It's like, no, whatever you're doing right now has all sorts of risks. You're just blind to them because you've habituated to them. They've become invisible. So if you keep yourself in the fog, then you can't tell when you screwed up. Now that isn't so good because you're still screwing up. You're just too blind, self-blind to notice. Although in the short term, that's less painful. If you make your criteria for success razor sharp, then you know every time you screw up. But that's great because then you could fix it. Or maybe you could adjust your damn plan. Either way, you can fix it. It seems to me you might as well make it the best one you could live in because you don't have anything better to do. If you actually want something, you can have it. Now the question then would be, well, what do you mean by actually want? And the answer is that you reorient your life in every possible way to make the probability that that will occur as certain as possible. And that's a sacrificial idea, right? It's like, you don't get everything. Obviously. But maybe you can have what you need. And maybe all you have to do to get it is ask. But asking isn't a whim or today's wish. It's like, you have to be deadly serious about it. You have to think, okay, like I'm taking stock of myself. And if I was going to live properly in the world and I was going to set myself up
such that being would justify itself in my estimation, and I don't mean as a harsh judge, exactly what is it that I would aim at? You could try this. This is a form of prayer, knocking. Sit on your bed one day and ask yourself, what remarkably stupid things am I doing on a regular basis to absolutely screw up my life? And if you actually ask that question, but you have to want to know the answer, right? Because that's actually what asking the question means. It doesn't mean just mouthing the words. It means you have to decide that you want to know. You'll figure that's out so fast it'll make your hair curl. You're perfectly capable of thinking. God only knows how. You're perfectly capable of immense feats of imagination and dream and fantasies. God only knows how you do all of that. What would happen if you consulted yourself about the best possible outcome for you? You might get an answer.
You know, it's funny the things people are afraid to ask. We live surrounded by individuals walking on eggshells, terrified of appearing foolish. But here's something I've learned. You only need to ask a stupid question once. Just once. And if you do it publicly in a classroom or a lecture hall, you'll find this strange thing happens. 80% of the people listening are wondering the same thing, but they're too scared to open their mouths. You, though, you ask, and if someone gives you a genuine answer, that question evaporates. You're not stupid anymore, you're updated, you're transformed. Now the real question, the useful one, is this. What foolish thing am I doing right now that I could stop doing if I were truly willing? Not will I stop, but could I? Because the two are not the same. There are behaviors you know are self-destructive, but you cling to them. Why? Because bluntly you like them. There's pleasure in them, or familiarity, or maybe even identity. But somewhere along the edge of your awareness, there's a small behavior you know is wrong and know is fixable. That's where you start. That's the doorway. If you're serious, really serious about change, try this. Go to your room, sit on your bed, alone, at night, no distractions, and say to yourself, not flippantly, not as a game, but in the tone of someone who's lost their way. Things aren't as they should be. Maybe I'm not who I ought to be. And perhaps life has become so burdensome that I've grown bitter, cynical, angry, seeing malice in everyone but refusing to look inward. If that rings true, then you have your first task. Ask, what am I doing right now that I know is wrong and that I am capable of changing? Sit with that. Meditate on it. And be warned, you will receive an answer. It won't be the answer you want. It will be inconvenient, but it will be the answer you need. And that answer, it won't be grand or overwhelming. It will be small, specific, and clear, perhaps embarrassingly so. Tidy your workspace. Stop lying to your partner. Get out of bed at the same time every morning. Tiny actions, grounded in truth. But once you start fixing those, once you start stitching the frayed edges of your life, your world will begin to reorganize itself. Improvement comes not through revolution, but through refinement, repeated, honest correction of what's clearly broken. It's astonishing how fast you can transform when you pursue truth over comfort. See, the admirable people I know, those with strength and integrity, they are relentless about honesty, not just with others, but with themselves. And because they tell the truth, they have power. And because they have power, they live lives full of meaning, full of intensity, adventurous in the truest sense. Now, try this experiment. Strip away everything you say just to impress others. All of it. All the flattery, the false agreement, the carefully crafted words designed to manipulate. Speak only what you believe to be true. That's not safe. That's not comfortable. But it's honest. And that's where life begins. Real life. Because here's the thing. If you're not speaking the truth, then who's speaking for you? If you say things you don't believe, then it's not your voice that's active, it's something else. Maybe it's the manipulative part of you, the cowardly part, the ego. But it isn't you, not the integrated, honest version of you. And if you build your life on that false voice, then the life you create isn't yours either. So what happens? You live for appearances. You tailor your words to get approval. You aim at outcomes rather than truth. You become a machine of deception. And when you finally succeed, it isn't even your success. It belongs to the false identity you crafted. You disappear in the process. And you might convince yourself that everyone does this. They don't. And even if they did, it wouldn't justify your participation. The more you speak what you don't believe, the more the real you retreats. And at the end of that road is resentment, bitterness, nihilism, because deep down, you know you never lived your life. You lived a performance. But there's a path forward. It's difficult. It involves sacrifice. It involves letting go of who you pretend to be, but it leads to authenticity. It leads to meaning, and that's worth everything.